Welcome to the Allison Knows podcast. Today, we're going to do a deep dive into two sources that offer really different visions for America's future.
Okay.
I've got Mandate for Leadership.
Uh-huh.
It's this blueprint from the Heritage Foundation, and it's all about how a conservative administration could totally reshape the federal government.
Wow.
It's like their playbook.
Yeah.
Yeah. Packed with ideas for everything from national security
Okay.
to education reform, and then we're going to look at American Marxism.
Right.
But this book digs into how Marxist ideology is seen as influencing American institutions and culture. So get ready for some interesting stuff.
It is pretty wild how both of these sources, even though they're coming from such opposite sides, they both tap into this anxiety about America's direction.
Totally.
They each offer their own diagnosis of what's wrong with the nation, and they each have their own ideas about how to fix it.
Okay, so let's start with American Marxism.
Sure.
It paints a pretty strong picture of government power, arguing that it's become a tool for a cultural revolution.
Right.
That wants to dismantle traditional American values and institutions.
It's important to remember that this worry about the government getting too big and messing with people's freedoms isn't new.
Yeah, that makes sense.
American Marxism traces this all the way back to people like John Dewey.
Oh, wow.
This really important figure in progressive education.
Yep.
Dewey thought schools should be shaping citizens' values and beliefs.
Wow.
He saw education as this powerful tool for social change.
He even called schools an ideological arm of the revolution or something.
Yeah, he did.
That's a pretty intense statement.
Yeah.
It shows how American Marxism links these historical figures to what they see as this crisis happening now.
Exactly.
The book also talks about critical race theory,
Uh-huh.
seeing it as a major part of this American Marxist agenda they talk about.
Right. So what are they saying about it?
Well, they argue that critical race theory, with this focus on systemic racism and power structures, they say it's being used to basically rewrite American history
Okay.
and demonize traditional values.
Mm-hmm.
And they say it's creating division in society.
Right.
They see it as a direct attack on the idea of a colorblind, meritocratic society.
That's a big deal to them.
Totally.
Hmm.
And to counter this, they want us to go back to what they see as the real American principles,
Right.
individual responsibility, free markets, and a colorblind approach to equality.
Interesting.
So basically, American Marxism is like a call to action
Okay.
to reclaim what they believe are the true principles of being American and to limit the government's role in our lives.
Yeah, they want to go back to this vision of America based on individual liberty and a small government.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now let's switch gears and look at Mandate for Leadership.
Okay. Sounds good.
Let's see how it lays out a conservative path forward.
Right.
Mandate for Leadership is ambitious, to say the least. It's got all these bold proposals that are meant to shake things up in the federal government. It outlines this conservative vision for, asserting executive power, strengthening national security, promoting economic nationalism,
Okay.
shrinking the bureaucracy, and really pushing for cultural conservatism.
Wow, that's a lot.
It's super clear that this document wants to systematically dismantle what they see as decades of progressive policies.
So they're trying to undo a lot of stuff.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
And one of their main strategies is centralizing power in the executive branch.
Interesting.
The authors believe that a conservative president has to be able to act quickly and decisively
I see.
to put their agenda in place and reverse what they see as the damage from all these progressive policies.
They think a strong executive is key to getting America back on top.
Exactly. There were a couple of proposals that really jumped out at me.
Oh, yeah? Like what?
Like the one about massively expanding the Navy to counter China's influence in the Pacific and Indian Oceans.
Wow.
It's a huge statement about what they prioritize in foreign policy.
Yeah, definitely. And what else stood out to you?
Oh, and then there's this idea of maybe ditching the Federal Reserve.
What?
Yeah, and moving towards a free banking system.
That's a big change.
Right. It seems like a pretty radical shift in our monetary policy.
For sure. That idea actually ties into their bigger goal of shrinking the federal government.
Oh, I see.
The idea is to give more power back to the states and to individuals,
Little kids.
which is like a core conservative belief.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So you can see how all these proposals are connected and reflect a whole worldview.
It's like a puzzle fitting together.
Totally. This deep dive is already so insightful. If you're enjoying this exploration of these different political visions, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this episode with your friends.
Yeah, spread the word.
We've also got tons of great content over on YouTube at Allison Knows. Go check it out. Okay, so let's dig deeper into these proposals and see where these two sources might actually overlap, even though they come from such different perspectives.
All right, let's do it. It's kind of interesting, actually. Despite being so different ideologically, both American Marxism and Mandate for Leadership are worried about the influence of big corporations, especially in tech.
Huh, I hadn't thought about that. So both sides think big corporations have too much power, but for different reasons?
Yeah, exactly. American Marxism sees them as part of this progressive agenda, Like they're involved in censorship and silencing conservative voices.
Okay.
They point to things that companies like Google and Facebook have done as like proof of this corporate overreach.
So American Marxism wants less government involvement in the market, but they also want to control these powerful corporations. Seems kind of contradictory.
Right. It's a bit of a puzzle. American Marxism views this corporate influence as like a direct attack on free speech and individual liberty, which are like core values to them. Mandate for Leadership, though, sees a different problem with big corporations.
Oh, okay. So how do they see it then?
They're more concerned about the economic impact, especially when it comes to globalization and trade.
Okay, so they're worried about the money side of things.
Exactly. They accuse Wall Street and big tech of putting profits ahead of American jobs and national security, especially in how they deal with China.
So they see it as kind of like economic warfare.
Yeah, they view it as something that's hurting American prosperity and our independence as a country.
So Mandate for Leadership is more into using the government's power to change trade policies and protect American interests from what they see as unfair competition from China.
Exactly. And this gets to like a core difference in how these two sources view the role of government.
Oh, yeah, I'm listening.
American Marxism mostly sees government power as a threat to individual freedom, whereas Mandate for Leadership sees it as like a necessary tool
Right.
to achieve national goals and protect American values and interests, even if that means taking a more active role in regulating the economy.
So one is like hands-off and the other is more hands-on.
Yeah, you could say that. It's fascinating how both sources use historical figures and events to support their arguments.
To do. Like how...
Well, American Marxism brings up people like Herbert Marcuse,
Okay.
this Marxist philosopher who was super critical of American consumerism and capitalism.
I see.
They see his ideas as like an early version of what they call cultural Marxism that's taking root in America today.
Interesting. On the other side, Mandate for Leadership looks back to a time when America was seen as like this dominant force in the world.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a time before what they see as too much regulation and globalist policies. They think a strong, assertive executive is the key to getting back to that position of power and leadership. It's amazing how they both use these historical parallels to tell their story and make your call to action feel urgent. And we can see this clash of worldviews happening right now.
Oh, yeah, where?
In all these debates about education, social welfare programs, even immigration.
Right.
American Marxism views a lot of these programs as like creating a culture where people depend on the government, which they believe weakens individual responsibility and self-reliance.
Mandate for Leadership, on the other hand, sees many of these programs as too expensive, inefficient, and often like not even achieving what they're supposed to.
Right.
They want to see big changes or even get rid of some programs altogether.
Oh, wow.
They argue that these programs are creating a huge bureaucracy and holding back individual initiative.
So it's like a fundamental disagreement about what's best for people.
Totally. It's a real clash of ideologies, with each side interpreting history differently and having different visions for the future.
But it's so interesting that even with their totally different diagnoses, both sources basically want to go back to what they see as core American principles.
Yeah, but their definitions of those principles are like night and day.
Totally. They have completely different ideas about what freedom, justice, and even patriotism actually mean.
It's almost like they're speaking different languages even when they're using the same words. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. It's as if they're looking at the same problems, but through completely different lenses.
Right.
It really makes you think about how these visions might shape the future of American politics and society. It feels like we're standing at a fork in the road with two very different paths in front of us.
It does feel like a pivotal moment.
It makes you wonder how we can even talk about these things constructively when our perspectives are so different. You know, how can citizens engage in these complex conversations when there's such a huge divide? It feels like we need to move past simple labels and sound bites.
I agree.
And really wrestle with the underlying principles and values that are at stake. What steps can we take to bridge this divide and have more productive dialogues? Because let's face it, these issues are not going away anytime soon. In fact, they're only getting more pressing.
It really does feel like a critical moment in our history, doesn't it?
It does. When you take a step back and look at the big picture, it's so interesting how these contrasting visions actually reflect these really deep philosophical differences about the role of government, the nature of individual liberty, and even what it means to be American, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. American Marxism sees a real danger in the concentration of power,
Hmm.
both in the government and in these huge corporations.
Right. And they put a ton of emphasis on individual agency and really limiting what the government can do in our lives.
Exactly. They're basically warning us about what they see as this slippery slope toward tyranny,
Okay.
and losing our individual freedoms. Mandate for leadership, though, sees things differently. They think we need a strong, assertive government
I see.
to deal with what they see as threats to American values and interests, both from inside the country and from outside.
So they're pushing for a more collectivist vision where national security, economic strength, and protecting a specific cultural and moral order are the top priorities.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's almost like these two sources are speaking totally different languages.
Right. Even when they're using the same words.
Exactly. They have completely different ideas about what freedom, justice, and even patriotism really mean.
It's wild. It's like they're looking at the same problems, but through these totally different lenses. It really makes you think about how these visions might shape the future of American politics and society.
For sure. It raises a super important question.
What's that?
How can we even have constructive conversations about this stuff?
Right.
Especially when our perspectives are so far apart.
I mean, it feels like we need to move past just throwing around labels and sound bites and actually try to understand the deeper principles and values that are at play here,
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely. What steps can we take to, bridge this divide
Yeah.
and start having more productive dialogues? Because let's be real, these issues aren't going away anytime soon.
Yeah, they're only getting more and more important.
Exactly.
Well, I think it starts with just being willing to listen to each other,
Yeah,
even when we completely disagree.
I agree.
We have to try to understand where these different perspectives are coming from, what experiences and values are shaping them, you know?
It's about finding that common ground.
Right. Even if we don't agree on everything, there have to be areas where we can work together to tackle these challenges. It makes you think about how these visions line up with different political philosophies and ideologies.
Sure.
Are these just two sides of the same coin, or is there something much deeper going on?
That's the million-dollar question.
It is, and it's one that deserves a lot more exploration. Maybe we could dig into the history of these debates
Yeah?
and see how different political thinkers have wrestled with ideas about liberty, equality, and the role of government throughout history.
That would be fascinating.
Right. Maybe by understanding the historical context, we can get a clearer picture of where we are today.
I think that's a great idea. It's so important for everyone to educate themselves about these issues.
Totally. Don't just rely on headlines or what you see on social media.
No way.
Read the sources, explore different viewpoints, and then come to your own conclusions.
Absolutely. And be careful of anyone who says they have all the answers or tries to make people who disagree with them look bad.
Yeah, good advice.
This is a complicated and ever-changing landscape,
Mm-hmm.
and it requires critical thinking and an open mind.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay.
This has been such a thought-provoking deep dive into American Marxism and mandate for leadership.
It really has.
It's been a real journey, and I hope you found it as insightful as I have. We've covered a lot of ground,
We have.
exploring these contrasting visions for America's future and unpacking what they might mean for our politics, our society, even our culture. You know, if you enjoyed this deep dive into American politics and all these different ideas about where our country should go, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this episode with your friends.
Yes. Spread the word.
We've also got tons of great content over on YouTube at Allison Knows, so be sure to check that out. Thanks for listening, and until next time, stay curious.
And don't forget to follow Allison on Blue Sky YouTube and TikTok. Like, subscribe, and share your comments to Allison Knows on YouTube.